I stayed on the ship until the steam started coming off the boilers, and I figured it was time to go. I found a rope, went down the side of the ship on a rope, floated into a mass of men that were in the water.
While I was in the water, I had a group of people come over, try to hold on to me, and they were fighting for their life. It was a little cold out there at that time of day. Don't remember how cold it was. I fought those people off, and then the last thing I remember doing was shoving a big plank in between my legs and then screaming for my mother.
I did think I was going to die a few times. I was so cold, my hands and that was going numb. And when I looked back, and at one time I could see 100 men behind me, and the next time I looked, there wasn't a soul.
In the meanwhile, this is probably 3.5 hours. I was in the water somewhere close to 30 minutes before I got picked up. Salt bodies floating by. By that time, men had frozen to death or drowned. We had been told 22 to 30 minutes was max survival time because of the temperature of the water. And like I say, it took 3 hours or better for rescue vessels to come that 5.5, 6 miles to get us.
At about 9 o'clock at night, after a final loud bang caused by the bulkheads breaking, the Leopoldville went to the bottom.
Now this was about approximately 4 hours after it was hit. It was pretty dark. You couldn't see the hand in front of you. It was a pitch black night. And the waves weren't that high, but still it was pretty good. And then we started to fish these people in, as many as we can get.
I was in the water for quite a period of time, it seemed, because I was drifted past many of the rescue ships. There were so many men in the water at one time, and that was part of the problem. If they had brought the rescue ships out in an orderly fashion and had gotten the men to go into the water in an orderly fashion, many more could have been rescued, but everybody was in the water almost at the same time.
We didn't save the bulk of them. We had maybe 50 men that we took in, but there were a lot of them that made it, and French boats, Coast Guard boats. There were a lot of people in the channel that night picking up people.
I'd say we got about maybe 40, it's all. But you got to remember, they are very heavy. That's the heaviest thing on earth to do, is try to, because they're soaked with that heavy coat on, and plus these people had rifles and their in fact I'd say half of them had their all their personal stuff with them.
The rescue boats worked all night, but a man could not live long in the icy winter waters. 1 hour after the Leopoldville went down, hardly anyone in the water was still alive.
The next morning they brought in what bodies they could pick up from the water, and they just stacked them up on the shoreline there, just like logs. It just tore your heart out to see your buddies laying there dead, frozen stiff, dead.
And that's all they kept telling us, is to lay them out like cordwood, right along, because the dock was long. And they laid, it's even hard to guess how many we laid out there.
Oh, I couldn't count it. There was plenty of what the French had picked up, what other boats had picked up, what our own government had picked up. The bodies were just up there for you to take a look and try to identify.
Bodies were washing up on shore for the next couple of weeks. But I didn't see anybody I knew, and I kind of lost heart. I didn't want to really find anybody I knew.
Somebody told me these Army Air Corps low boys trailers were brought in, and they loaded the bodies on there and took them to the general hospital first, where they tagged them, done whatever they were supposed to do, and then they took them to St. Mary Glees Cemetery. So about a week later, I went to St. Mary Glees Cemetery, because that's not too far either from where I was. And sure enough, they were all buried there. And I tried to find out exactly how many there were, but nobody would say nothing. Nobody would say how many there were. Nobody would even say who it was. You know, it was just soldiers, period.
Many of the over 1,000 secret documents on the Leopoldville were declassified in 1996. Only the high-ranking admirals and generals of Allied command, whose names appear on these pages, will ever know why they were sealed for 50 years. But where the cover-up started and how it was maintained is now clear. In January 1945, 2 weeks after the sinking, the British Admiralty sent a message to General Eisenhower, insisting that in order to keep the morale of the U-boat fleet low, the Leopold disaster be kept in strict silence. Eisenhower agreed with the British and sent a message to Washington ordering any public statement made about the disaster be cleared through himself and Admiralty. The generals in Washington disagreed. They wrote back that consistent War Department policy was to release the facts of a ship sinking whenever the loss of American military personnel was large. But Eisenhower and Admiralty got their way. The next of kin would not be informed, nor any statements released about the disaster. In a startling reversal of policy, the War Department caved in and agreed to release no information about the sinking. Notification telegrams were finally sent out to the next of kin 3 weeks later, stating only that the men were missing in action in the European area.
We were told explicitly not to say a word about the mess that we were in, and the neglect and the lack of communications. But then again, it was war, and those things do happen.
Myself and other officers in the company got letters from families that wanted to know how. And we weren't able to tell them. We were under strict orders that the subject was not to be discussed. So we wrote as best we could and said, your son or your husband died doing his duty. But we were not free to give them any information as to what had happened.
I tried to write letters here, and no more I'd write something in a letter, they'd go to work and censor it. They'd throw it away. And then the lieutenant would come up to you and say, hey, are you sick? Do you feel right? I said, what do you mean? You're not supposed to write home about this in your letters. I said, I just want to let them know what happened to us. You're not allowed to tell them what happened to us that night. This was it. They would not let us tell them.
The U.S. Office of Inspector General conducted an investigation into the Leopoldville. It lasted just 5 days, and the mere 2-page report found both British authorities at Southampton and the Belgian crew negligent, but not one American on the Cherbourg rescue operation.
Admiral Stark oversaw the investigation and okayed it, and it was a sloppy investigation. Eisenhower okayed the secretiveness, not letting it out. There are letters signed by him, although I wasn't allowed to see him then at the time, nor at that time was I allowed to see the Stark thing. But I was allowed to see enough of the investigations to know how badly they were done.
In contrast to the Americans, the British Admiralty conducted a thorough, secret inquiry into the disaster. After 2 weeks of hearings, the board found the Belgian crew and Captain Limbour negligent. Commander John Pringle, captain of the Brilliant, was found partly responsible for the loss of 300 additional lives. For this and other errors in judgment, they disciplined him and transferred him to another ship. However, 1 month later, Pringle and his crew received a secret commendation for his gallant action from an unexpected source: an American general.
The Americans in Cherbourg were negligent. The British convoy commander was negligent. The Belgians were not only negligent, they were really foul.
Later, in another strange twist, the Admiralty denied the findings of their own investigation and completely exonerated the Belgians.
The Board of Inquiry was of the opinion that the master, ship's officers and crew carried out their duties in accordance with the highest traditions of the Belgian Marine.
I think the real purpose of the silence was maybe not to hide the event, but not to embarrass our allies, perhaps, to avoid really facing this. He just called it an act of war, and there it goes, and that explains away a lot of things.
The cover-up continued after the war, but the press heard rumors of the disaster from survivors' accounts.
Before we reached the shore, United States, we were told that the newspaper people would be at the docks and they would be asking questions. We could admit, yes, we were on the Leopoldville, or we were in the 66th Infantry Division. But other than to give any description of what happened or details, we were not to do so. After all, I was an officer and I have to follow the wishes of my superiors, which I did.
In 1946, the New York Times and Reuters began investigations into the Leopoldville sinking, based on survivors' accounts circulating in America. From the Reuters London office, the British journalist Ronald Bedford wrote the Admiralty for information.
I went down to investigate the background to the sinking of the Belgian liner Leopoldville. At first, the Admiralty were giving me some information, but later on, some weeks after, I was called down again and told that, well, they were sorry, but there was no more that they could tell me. And this was indeed followed up by a letter to me from Admiralty confirming that there was no more help that they could give.
The British Admiralty's policy on the status of the Leopoldville was decided by Richard Royal Powell, head of Military Branch 2, in a memo dated 19th March 1946, almost 1 year after the end of the war in Europe. They would remain classified for the next 50 years.
The story of the Leopoldville does not reflect any great credit upon us, and I should be averse from disclosing it until the need is very strong. To issue anything publicly now in America might only serve to revive a controversy which would be better allowed to die.
The events that took place that Christmas Eve, 1944, have been engraved into the memories of the men who survived the watery death of the Leopoldville. They have lived with their secret nightmare now for more than half a century.
Well, there's where the anger comes in. Especially that one letter that I got that this guy was close to me and he wrote to his family about me, you know, you know, I was a good friend of his and all that. And then when he died and disappeared, then I asked them, I said, what did they tell you? He said, just missing in action. That's all the news they did. They didn't know the heartache and the thing of what happened that night. And that was a happening. They didn't know nothing about it.
about that, and how in the world, and even I was on there, I could never tell them. I've never met them or anything, but if I ever met them and everything, I would lie about it. I'd tell them, oh, he just got hit and he died a hero, you know. I'd never tell them what happened there, that he was abandoned and that dang on brought him in there in that ship and he went down with it. I could never tell them that.
When I did get letters that I received at my home, and they got that information from the New York Times. My name was the one that spoke that came in, that I had returned and was with the 66th Infantry Division. I wrote a letter to those people, whether it was the wife or the mother, and I just explained that I didn't know their son, but there was a tragedy, and that's it. I couldn't go into details because I wasn't authorized.
It was done with absolutely no compassion. I can't imagine that what could be worse for morale than sending somebody a letter saying your son or your husband is missing in action. When he isn't missing in action, he's dead and you know it. And you still send that.
My mother got his Purple Heart from when he was killed in action, and that's all that it said on it, that he died of wounds received in the European theater. But nobody ever said really what happened to him, except that he had died of wounds, and they never found his body. So, you know, I mean, I don't know how they would have known how he died, except that they didn't.